It was really bad. It was really bad. So today I want to talk about a concept I call planning for pain, or leaning into discomfort is really what it means. And as a case study, I'm going to share about my own traumatic experience. But let me tell you up front that if you're looking for a really dramatic or tragic story, this is not it. It's arguably the lightest, even most comical thing you could have while still technically being traumatic. These are all concepts that tie to a life rule that I apply for myself, which is as much as possible to avoid making decisions based in fear. And we're going to talk about why I feel that's so important and kind of what that looks like in actually applying it. So that's where we're going. Let's get into it. A couple basic principles on the topic of fear and handling that. First of all, we need to acknowledge that fear serves a purpose. It is useful. I think many of us develop a really negative association with it and then maybe go to the point of actually being judgmental or critical of ourselves whenever we feel afraid, and that's not fair. At the root, it's just an emotion, and it's actually telling us that something is wrong or something needs addressing. Or specifically, it's telling us that we may be in danger. That is the purpose of fear. Very useful, actually. We need to be able to see when we might be in danger. And this obviously could be physical danger. I think for most of us today, it has much more to do with sort of social danger. The risk of doing something to upset the people around us, or to cause shame or somehow embarrassment on ourselves. That's something lots of us deal with, like social anxiety, so rooted in a very social kind of fear. The fear in and of itself is our minds or our bodies trying to tell us something, and that's important. So that's first principle, is that fear actually serves a purpose. It's not something we want to ignore or erase, and it's not something to feel guilty about. It's a natural, good thing to have in our lives to a certain extent. But the next very important principle is the concept that letting fear control us. As soon as fear is a motivating factor or it's in charge of our lives, it's like a breeding ground for anxiety. We'll kind of talk about the connections there, but we want to be in charge of our fear and how we respond to it. We don't want fear to be in charge of us. Anytime we give up control, that naturally makes us feel anxious because we're not in charge of where our lives are going. Many of us are in certain areas of our lives directed by fear rather than what we really want or our own free will. We kind of give up control there because we're trying to avoid an unpleasant consequence. So that's the second principle. So fear serves a purpose, but we don't want it to be in charge. And then right along with this, kind of the third principle that I see tying into this idea of fear and how I try to approach it is that peace, like a real sense of being settled and kind of grounded, peace is often right on the other side of something that scares us. Very often, if there's something causing us tension and anxiety, as soon as we push past it, we lean into it, we see what's actually there, that's where the peace comes. Those are kind of the three ideas, and I'll touch back on those later. Now to talk about my own story a little bit. And I laugh because it's years ago now, and I've moved on from it, and it's objectively a little bit funny, but I was genuinely traumatized by my time teaching middle schoolers. I'm just not even kidding. And that to me is kind of funny. The actual circumstance was extremely stressful. I had just graduated college, so it was my first year working at a coffee shop trying to figure out what to do with myself. One of the schools in the area, they had a teacher quit, like really badly. Like 2 months into the school year, this teacher like moved away. They were like, I'm done with these students, which I should have taken as a bit of a red flag. That they said, we need an emergency sub, and would you be interested? Because I do love working with kids and I like to teach, and I'd been considering going on to get my teaching certification. So it seemed like kind of a reasonable actually opportunity for me to just jump into a classroom and see what it was like. But the classroom happened to be 3 classes. So I taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade English and literature. So it was 3 grades, 2 classes each. So there was almost no downtime. I was an emergency sub, so I had been trained for literally nothing. I had 0 training. They had almost no curriculum planned. It was insane. And I was like brand new out of college, completely like doe-eyed and optimistic. And I was like, oh, I love kids. Like, this will be so fun. And let me be clear, I really loved each of those kids. I really did. I still teach, but now I teach kids one at a time. I teach music lessons. I was completely unprepared for the classroom management. And as a group, you take 20 or 30 seventh graders in a room together, and it is insane. And you have to be ready to like lay down the law. And that's hard for me. Anyways, it was really bad. It was really bad. I mean, I didn't have kids like attacking each other or anything, but literally I had some who were out of their desks a lot. Someone set off an actual stink bomb, and I thought we'd moved past those like 30 years ago, but no, that happened. And then, 8th grade boys, so many inappropriate questions, and like the kids are testing you all the time and they're really pushing your limits. You get the picture. You can imagine. Very stressful. And I was making up curriculum as I went too, so I never felt prepared. And if you didn't have a plan for like every minute, they would like jump down your throat and it would turn into chaos. I had another 5 or 6 months to go and I felt completely overwhelmed, totally out of my element. There weren't extra resources or people to like put in the room with me. I couldn't just get another adult in there to help like control the room. I felt super overwhelmed, really on my own. I was just very stressed and I had to really gear up to go to work, and I felt really beat up at the end of the day. Yeah, it was tough. And I think the hardest thing and the reason it ended up feeling traumatic for me, because truly by the end of that year, I developed weird anxious habits in my eating and my sleeping. My life, I felt, was out of my control. I couldn't get a handle on what was happening. I felt like I was getting ready to suffer, basically, to like be put into embarrassing or difficult or stressful situations over and over again. And I just wanted it to stop, like just to wait for it to end, kind of. I was like, we're going to get through this. It'll be over soon. I did my best. I did grow from it in the end, but I really grew later looking back on it and saying, how could I do that differently? Because I failed to do what I now think of as like planning for pain or leaning into the discomfort. I just kind of tried to avoid it as best I could, knowing that I couldn't avoid it. So I didn't take any ownership for it. I didn't try to find a way to proactively enter into this discomfort. I just waited for it to end. So now I have another, for instance, for you that I feel like I handled much better. Like I said, I developed some anxious sleeping habits, so it left me with insomnia, and I used to feel really anxious and bad when I couldn't sleep. And it started during the school year. I was like, I must sleep. I have a terrible day ahead of me. It's going to be worse if I'm tired. And it was like this anxious spiral about, oh, I'm so afraid of this pain that's coming. I am so afraid of the pain that's coming. It was just on loop in my mind. I was so afraid. And the fear seemed rational too. I was like, I'm afraid because this is going to happen and I hate it. Like, it was really tough. And I would just sink into feeling anxious because I was not in control. I was giving up control. I was leaning into fear rather than trying to find another way around it. And at some point, I don't really remember why. I think it's actually just because it kept getting worse. I decided to lean into the discomfort. I was like, okay, I would do a good sleep routine, do the logical things that help calm you down and get you ready for bed. I did all of that. But then once in a while, I still couldn't sleep. And so I started, instead of like laying in bed for 2 hours, trying to sleep, feeling anxious and stressed, I would say, okay, I'm not sleeping right now, but I want to take this time for myself. I don't want to be overwhelmed by anxiety. I don't need to be. I'm going to be tired tomorrow, and I accept that. And I'm going to lean into it by doing something like reading a book or praying, or actually giving up my time, like this precious time that I had to sleep that I wanted to control so badly. I was like, I'm going to give it up right now. I'm going to stop trying to sleep, and I'm going to do something else that I'm choosing actively. I'm going to do something that I enjoy right now. It's going to add to my being tired tomorrow, and that's okay. I accept it. And this sounds like a small thing, you guys, but it was like big. It was a big thing. I was like, I'm choosing to be tired tomorrow. And understand, it's completely different than like you're out with your friends and you stay up late and you're not worried about. That's entirely different. You have to put it in the context of fear and anxiety. I had a ton of fear about being tired because I had associated it with these terrible days. I was like, I'm going to suffer so much tomorrow. So for me to say, yes, I'll be tired and that's okay, and I'm going to actually, in a weird way, like lean into it, like pursue it a little bit, it was super liberating. As soon as I started doing that, like the anxiety started to dissipate. Not shockingly, that would help me to sleep as well. But that's the way it is in so many parts of our lives. We see pain coming and we tense up really tight because we don't want the pain. And we're like, I'm just going to get through this as best I can. And then because it feels completely out of our control, we get like pummeled by it. And that's what, in a big way like lends itself to trauma is feeling tensed and pummeled. Like I'm doing whatever I can to just white knuckle through this pain right now. And as soon as we can look at something painful coming and say, okay, that's going to be tough and I'm going to do it. I'm going to choose it somehow. If we can somehow choose the discomfort or choose the pain, that's coming anyways. This is it's not the same thing as going out of your way to suffer. Like I said, I knew I was having sleep troubles. I did what I could to minimize the pain ahead of time. And then when it was coming anyways, it's a really important difference. Then I would say, okay, it's coming anyways. What can I get from this? Where can I find something good and something beautiful and something for me in this difficult situation? I'm going to find the gift here. I'm going to find something good. I'm going to grow from this experience. This is like one of the, if not the underlying principle for the difference between post-traumatic stress disorder and post-traumatic growth. We can experience terrible traumatic experiences and grow from them. People do. It's crazy that they do. They can. There's something completely liberating about deciding that you're going to take it for yourself. We make so many decisions completely being controlled by fear because we don't know that's what's happening. This is part of why I'm so big on self-reflection and journaling and like counseling if you feel like you've got big themes of anxiety and fear that you don't understand. Because if you don't understand it, if you don't see it, you can't make a choice in the first place. We want to understand what it is, take a deliberate action in our lives for ourselves rather than letting fear be in charge. And remember that peace is usually right on the other side of like whatever it is we're afraid of. Usually as soon as we challenge the thing that we're so afraid of, it shrinks. We find it's not that bad in the first place. And because we've just challenged it, we've just taken the stand, we've taken charge of our lives, we find like a ton of peace. And even if it is painful, it's much easier to bear. So I hope you guys find that helpful. It's a hugely important theme for me in my life. That's what I had for you all today. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please do subscribe, and I will see you next time.